Hi, I'm Tara House, and I write fantasy and science fiction.
And I'm Erin, and I write fantasy fiction and poetry.
And today we're talking about what makes a good villain.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when we think of like what makes a good villain, it's important to remember that there's like different kinds of villains. Like there's the ones that are like, I'm just a representation of evil. And then there's ones that's like, this is a person who has like goals and things. And I think that's an important distinction to make.
Yeah. And sometimes a villain is just a creature that is not always super sentient. I don't know. They're usually not like the main villain. Usually those are just kind of like things that are associated with the villain, like the flying monkeys, right? Well, that's a bad example, depending on which iteration of that story you're talking about. But yeah, so it's like it's just important to remember, I guess, like what the different types are.
I think so, because I think you don't need to worry about like if you're doing, because I feel like the creature one that you mentioned is more like I feel like that's a lot in horror. Like I saw the movie Nope.
Yeah.
That's kind of a spoiler saying that it's a creature. But anyway,
well,
like on a lot of horror and stuff, it's like you're like trying to fight this like animal or something, or even like survival stuff. It's like nature is like the enemy.
Right.
And in that point, it's like you don't want to I think it's important to remember that so that you don't like take these rules too far. Like if you're doing like a monster as a villain, you don't need to be like, my monster has this tragic backstory. Like it's okay if it just wants to eat people. Or if it's like zombies.
Yeah.
Right? Like they don't have a motivation or like a belief system.
Yeah.
And they can still be great villains because they're just scary and like kind of fun.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned horror as one that kind of leads into that, because now that you said that, I'm like, oh yeah, there are plenty of examples where it's just you're running for your life, and that's kind of that's the conflict, is like you're gonna get destroyed.
Yeah. I think like in a lot of like fantasy, I feel like tends to be more like,
but we're exploring things.
Yes, like the villains tend to be more, I mean, I guess there are fantasy books, but I can't think of any. There tend to be more like, the villain is like a representation of evil, like Sauron, or they're like an enemy that has like things it wants, like Voldemort or something like that.
Yeah. So on that note, with things it wants, motivation.
Yes.
That's an important thing to talk about with villains. So like, because we have those different types. So like where you're saying it's just evil incarnate, sometimes not even incarnate, because it's just like, woo. I don't know. You said Sauron, I guess, is an example of that. He's kind of like
just a force. But in the movies anyway.
Yeah. And so it's like you don't necessarily get to know like why they're doing what they're doing. And sometimes there may not be a why. Maybe it's just that is the nature of that entity, is that they will destroy for whatever reason. I don't know. But when we're talking about villains with more agency, or villains with more of a tragic backstory, or that are a little more human, it gets a little bit deeper and messier into the why. So do you usually, when you're, I guess, reading and kind of writing, like, how much do you care about the motivation with a villain that's in that category? I
tend to care a lot about the motivation, especially if it's a story where it's like the villain is like a political figure, or like a like, you know, some other human being, right? It's like the idea that like they're just evil for the sake of it, I feel like kind of oversimplifies things if you're trying to tell like an epic tale anyway. And they're like a human being, right? I think sometimes if you don't give villains like motivation, they can become like straw men for like certain arguments or points of view. And I think part of what I like in showing a villain's motivation is helping the reader understand like how they got there, and maybe even having a moment of like, oh, I can understand why someone would do this. Yeah. And I don't think every villain has to be something you understood, right? Like there's real people in history who like the things they've done are so terrible that you're like, no, I don't understand why you've done this.
Yes.
But I think it's like a good exercise in empathy and like self-reflection to be like, oh, they're doing this because like they think this is the best for whatever reason. Right. Even if you don't agree with that, like you can like put yourself in that mindset.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm usually kind of like looking for, if it is that kind of villain, at least in reading, I'm kind of wondering, like, okay, what is their motivation, and is it based on a misunderstanding of something or a misapplication of something? Like, do they have this idea about the world that is informed by like a subset of experiences that isn't necessarily the whole? I guess I think those are the villains that I most want to kind of like have some hope for, that they would like, I don't know, like change.
Yeah.
But I think in writing, yeah, because it's difficult to kind of like form the mindset and the perspective of a fictional villain, and just kind of, I don't know, ascribe that to them of like, no, they're just bad. They're just really selfish, or they just really want power. I guess that's the thing, is like kind of knowing those kind of stereotypical motivations for a villain who really just is bad, or really just is like evil, and then kind of wondering like, okay, well, how realistic is that it's really kind of able to be narrowed down to that. I think that's something that like in fiction people are kind of moving away from a lot, of being like, okay, well, we have this like kind of more well-rounded kind of idea of who a person is, so it's like they're not just fully evil. But I think it's like, but then you do lose some of the, not fun, but like the idea of them, of there being villains who are just evil, and you really want them to be destroyed, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I think I don't know. I feel like, yes, I think I agree with you. And I also feel like sometimes like with motivation, like a person can have like a bad motivation. Like I'm thinking like you could have a villain who wants power, and their motivation could be like they think they deserve it, right? Like if their whole lives you have a character who's maybe like, oh, maybe they're nobility or descendants from some powerful magic users or whatever. It's like they believe that, they believe they just deserve to be in charge, which is like a real thing that real people have.
Yeah.
And I feel like that still counts as like being a motivation, because they, instead of just being like Sauron, where they're evil just because they're evil. I know, I'm going to do a little caveat for the Lord of the Rings people. I know in the Silmarillion, they get more into who Sauron is. But in the Lord of the Rings, you don't really, from what I remember, it's been a long time since I've read it, you don't really know why, like, where he comes from. But I think even that, it's like you can, even if their view of reality is really twisted, they still have, like, a view of reality. They think they're getting something that belongs to them. Which is still messed up, but you can kind of, you can be like, wow, that's crazy. Like,
yeah. So when we think about those villains who have those motivations that are a little bit more nuanced and they're a little more complicated, it's like you kind of, at least I think we've experienced this, it's like you kind of start like having those hopes for them that they may like choose a different way or something like that, or you just kind of want them to like kind of have the consequences of their actions thrust upon them, I guess. So what kind of endings kind of go with that, I guess, is what we're exploring. Is like, when is it the most satisfying, I guess, for the villain to have their comeuppance, and when is it more satisfying for them to have that shift where they're like, I see the error of my ways, I don't want to be bad anymore.
I feel like the classic thing I think of for that second thing of like is like Zuko in The Last Airbender. Well, even like for both of them, you have about like Zuko and Azula.
Yes.
Where Azula's ending is kind of satisfying, but it's also like, I mean, it's maybe satisfying in like a cathartic way. It's like, it's also very tragic. Yeah. It's like you realize they're like these two kids who their dad has like put all these roles onto them, like the good child and the bad child, and like your goal is to do these things for me. Like he's giving them jobs that should belong to adults. And it's really satisfying to see Zuko turn away from that and become his own person. But it's also somewhat like, I don't know, emotionally resonant, I guess, because I don't know if satisfying is the right word, to see Azula, like all of the things that have pushed her to be this golden child, like eventually breaking her and like her snapping. And you're like, oh wow, that shows how, like she shows how the path their dad had, like its ultimate end. And then Zuko shows the turning away from that. Right.
Yeah. And we were talking about earlier, the thing that also is easier to like accept that for Zuko is that you get to actually see the result of that change in the arc. Because that's sometimes frustrating when you have like a villain who at the end, they're just like, oh, look, the consequences of my actions have arrived and I don't want that. So I'm just going to stop going down this path I was going down because it isn't going my way. Like, I think that it's really easy to have that suspicion if they do turn, because you're just kind of like, well, are you just doing that because that's what's convenient? But then you have characters like Zuko where they actually like have a full on like 180 change, and you get to like watch them kind of like move in the other direction. So I think it just kind of depends on whether you kind of are having to like make predictions, I guess, like with what people would do. But I think it also just kind of probably matters in the context of the story also.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Because there are some villains where like they have opportunities to turn away from their path, like to turn back, and they keep choosing evil like over and over again and like choosing to harm others. And when those people like eventually get their comeuppance and the hero beats them, it's like satisfying in that you're like, yes, like, justice has been achieved on these people.
Yeah. I think that's it. That's the thing for me, at least, is like in watching or reading things, is just like, were you given an opportunity at any point and like clearly being handed like, hey, this is the right answer. And this is like, and here's also maybe some like generosity with the way it's being given to you. Like, I feel like depending on the type of hero, a lot of the times they're like, you're like, I know it's like within you, like that kind of thing or whatever, and they still are like, no. But I think because they do that to Azula sometimes too, right? Like they're like, I don't know, maybe I'm making that up. I
think Zuko tries to talk her out of it.
And it's just like, hey, like we can like understand why you've like taken these actions and kind of like gone down this road, but hey, like that doesn't mean that it's the right thing to. So I think that's kind of the crux of it, as far as like how they end, is like, were they given that kind of handed to them, or just like clearly offered like an opportunity to change. I don't know.
Or even like if they weren't like offered an opportunity to change by the hero, like you even think of like I can think of someone like Thanos, who also has like a clear motivation. He's not an embodiment of evil villain. He's like a he's like efficiency and like solving problems by getting rid of the people who are having the problems. And like it is satisfying to see him lose because like of how powerful he is and like how sure he is that his ideology is right. And like, he's just like, he's just so confident in like that he knows what's best for the world.
Right. And it's also like, he's a really good example. That might be an interesting kind of case study, because at least in the context of the movies, it's like he does get the consequences of his actions and he says it was worth it. He's like, I am suffering, but other people may not be. And that's like, which is like that, you gotta be really careful. That in and of itself is like, okay, like sure, with no context, like, that you would suffer for the benefit of other people. Yes, but you've also like caused suffering for a lot of people too. So it's just kind of like, that one's so complicated and weird.
Because even though like his motivation is not something that most people will empathize with, and that they've like thought that, like most people don't think we should kill half of the world.
Right.
I would hope. But you understand how he thinks he's the hero of the narrative.
Yeah.
Even though he's like very definitely not. But
That's a really good example. I had kind of forgotten that was his whole thing at the end. But
because like really captures it. The first half of Endgame, he's like, and again, well, I guess maybe put spoiler warnings. It's been a long time. It's been a long time. You should have seen it. But like in the first half of Endgame, it ends with him being like, yes, and like the sun is rising. He's like, I've achieved this.
Yeah.
Even though they're like, what did it cost? But it's like everything.
Yeah.
But he thinks it was worth it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Man. Yeah.
It was good. It was good. I stand that up till Endgame, Marvel was good. I stand on that.
Yeah. Okay. Are there any other examples to kind of explore? I think one that's interesting, since we're talking about Marvel, and if we're just talking about villains that I have, like, I don't know, considered, Loki is a really weird one to consider, because he goes back and forth somewhat. Well, and then you have to like, it depends. Are we counting TV show Loki? Because like that's a different person. Like, we get into, like, multiverse stuff because but even in Infinity War, I think people speculate, like, when he gets killed, like, for real.
Yes.
Like, I think there are still people who kind of speculate that he was still going to turn on Thor and try to join them because he does this whole little theatric thing, which I think most people are like, okay, that was fake. That wasn't the real action. But just because he's a character that's his whole thing, is that he's deceptive.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. That one, it's harder to, I mean, like, we know what his motivation is for the most part. And this is all also, like, we're not talking about actual mythology and we're not talking about actual comics. We're totally just talking about the movies.
Yes.
But, like, yeah, I don't know. Because the end for him is also, like, you get really mixed emotions a little bit because you're like, he had so much potential to stab them in the back again. But you also are like, oh, but
he could have been so good.
Yes.
They kind of end him, like, before his arc is fully done. And there's another character that I'm thinking of, which for people who've read the Stormlight Archive will know who I'm thinking. It was like, because it's really, I think that's the thing that's, like, a really good way to do tragedy for a villain. Is like to have them come up to the moment where, like, are they changed? Are they better? And then, oh, now they're dead. Like,
oops.
Yeah, but, like, it's like,
yeah.
It's really shocking because it's not done super often. And it's also really just like, oh, like, we were so close.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a good villain. And he is, unlike Thanos, I feel like his motivation feels a lot less mature.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting. I don't know.
Clear.
I like it. Yeah, like, he's like, oh, he's like the slighted prince. You're like, oh, yeah.
But I think we can all see ourselves in that a little bit of, like, I think I deserve these things. And so it's just like, his is a lot more common of an angst than Thanos's is.
Yeah.
As far as, like, the specifics.
I agree. Because it almost makes me think of, like, if someone's a teenager and they're like, okay, but why does my older sibling get to go to a party, but I can't? Like, that's kind of the energy that he's bringing in the first ones. But
yeah, my jerky older sibling, but I'm so nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of and you're like, well, you can see how, like, you can take that kind of feeling and amplify it.
Yeah. Do you have any other examples?
Not ones that really do anything super different. But if now I'm just thinking about Marvel, and I think I also really like Wilson Fisk as a villain from Daredevil. I don't know if you ever saw Daredevil. I really like him. He's very, because Daredevil's a lot more like street level, right? Like, there's less cosmic powers and stuff. Right. And Wilson Fisk is kind of just like this, like, slightly unhinged guy. Well, maybe not slightly, this unhinged guy, but, like, they also, like, go into how he came to be who he is in a way that, like, makes you empathize with him and, like, want something better for him, but, like, he's a bad guy and he's making bad choices. So, like, he's not going to, like, he's going to continue to do the things that are wrong and hurtful to, like, the other characters. But, like, yeah, it's interesting when they have villains like that where you almost are like, oh, I feel bad for you. But, like, you need to be stopped.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of any that are non-Marvel. The only thing that's coming to mind is Star Wars, and how Darth Vader and Palpatine are kind of an interesting foil in that way because you have the prequels, you get to, I think his change at the end is way more convincing with that context.
Oh, yes.
Then again, I did not have the experience of Star Wars without knowledge of the prequels. So I don't know if anybody, like, who is maybe older and, like, just saw the original trilogy and, like, had a thought about it, and then you get the context.
Well, I saw the original trilogy before I saw the prequels.
Okay.
And I also feel like I'm not a good example because I was, like, 7.
But he also kind of, like, he sacrifices himself a little bit. Like, he puts himself in the path of harm.
Oh, yeah. Well,
even at the end of, like, episode 6. Like,
well, yeah, he sure dies.
Right. But I just mean, like, it's easier to believe that he's not having a convenient change of heart.
Oh, yes, because he literally dies.
Because he's just like, no, I'm going to jump in the way of this lightning. And Palpatine is just like, again and again, he's like, I want some power, and I'm just really going to do some crazy stuff to get it. And then even, well, we don't have to talk about the sequels, but you see that he's just going to continue to do that even after he's been defeated. Like, his whole thing is just like, no, I'm coming back. Yeah. So, anyway.
Okay, yeah, so those are our thoughts on villains and what we like, what makes a good villain. If you have any examples of villains you think are done really well, drop them in the comments. If you think there's anything we forgot to cover, let us know. But yeah, thanks for watching.
Bye.